Ready, set, and okay. Now, one constant around the world, both today and in the past, is the belief not only in the supernatural, but in which are often called ghosts. The problem is there exists a great confusion beyond the word. What exactly is a ghost? Is a ghost the spirit of a lost soul? Is it a spirit of a soul that is sending a specific message or a prophecy? Or is it a telepathic entity entering our mind? Or maybe it's like the Matrix, right? Glitches in the fabric of time and space. Maybe even spirit beings that have never been living souls, or angels, or demons, natural phenomenon, right? Or a historical echo that occurs when the time or temperatures are just right, or even an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato, as we see in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Tale. So, what is the most curious from the Greco-Roman era all the way to the present day, descriptions of ghosts are more alike than different. Is this due to the transmission of similar stories and ideas across cultures? Is it, or a result of human psychology reacting to perceptions in a similar way because of our intrinsic commonalities as humans? Or is it because there really is something out there that could be understood as a ghost? And that is why the responses are similar. Yet most scientists will either deny the existence of ghosts or will not comment on the topic, leaving the research often to those who are deemed to advancing pseudoscience. So where we're at, in many cases throughout the centuries, they will say, evidence is against it, but testimony is for it. And that causes the problem. So let's kind of look at some different perspectives. I know that Dennis and Michael Wiskel's work, The Hauntings of Everyday Life, in 2016, they mentioned the fact that they went through various respondents to ghostly phenomena. They did a survey, and they said that many of the respondents were convinced they were simply seeing something uncanny, something inexplicable, extraordinary, mysterious, or eerie. Anthropologists Joseph Baker and Christopher Botter talked about the fact that we argue that the inherent liminality of spirits as cultural constructs accounts for their persistence, power, and continual reoccurrence, that they're just on the margins of our understandings. Benjamin Ratford mentions in 2017, if ghosts are human souls, and then why did they appear clothed and with presumably soulless objects like hats and canes and dresses? Not to mention the many reports of ghost trains and cars and carriages. I mean, they don't have souls, so why is it, right? Perhaps a more evolved response is Toke Thompson, who states that ghost stories are one of those things that have never been proven, but have also never been disproven, right? He says, science can't really disprove ghosts exists. He notes that over 50% of Americans believe in ghosts, and he remarks, well, here's a case where most Americans believe something that both their science and their religious leaders tell them not to believe, right? So Joshua J. Marks comments in his Ghosts of the Ancient World that to the people of the ancient world, there was no doubt the soul of a human being survived bodily after death. So an ancient assumption, yeah, there is life after death. That was the belief. The dead lived on, and in another form. There's an afterlife that was largely dictated by several factors. You know, what was the afterlife like? Well, the kind of life they had lived here on Earth, how the remains were disposed of at the time of their death, and how they were remembered by the living. These are the major factors. Once again, what kind of life they lived on Earth, how the remains were disposed of at their death, and how they were remembered by the living. This tripartite division, these three ideas are so important because, drum roll please, we see the three all around the world. We see this in the Mediterranean basin. We see this in sub-Saharan Africa. We see this, in the areas of the Middle East. We see this in China. We see this in Japan. We see this in India. We see this even to other places. So this is amazing. There's a few exceptions, but it seems to be more widespread. But all ancient cultures held that the dead could come back to haunt the living. They did. But there were, certain laws that did exist, certain spiritual laws, right? That the souls of the dead would remain there unless given license by the gods to return to the land of the living for some specified purpose. These reasons could be quite a few. If you were not married properly, that's a big one, right? Another one is that, well, you may have some unfinished business, right? And or maybe the way the death occurred, was it in many cases were they murdered? Was there a suicide? Were they lost at sea? Something terrible, tragic happened, and their body was unable to be buried properly. And this is another possibility. Okay, so if the dead appeared to the living, it always meant to the ancients that something was really terribly wrong. Otherwise, there's no reason for a visit. Now, let's go back. Let's do a little bit of visitation ourselves. And let's go back to ancient Mesopotamia. Of course, death was the final act of life from which there was no return around the Fertile Crescent region. The land of the dead was known by many names. One is Urkala, basically the land of no return. And this place was a dreary darkness where the dead dwelt, and they fed off the dirt and sipped from mud puddles, and it's just not a great afterlife. It's really dark and depressing. We're reduced to the point of squeaking like a bat in a darkened cave. This realm was ruled over Queen Ereshkigal. No souls were allowed to leave Akala. We hear these stories, of course, them do escape, right? Now, of course, the exceptions are if the soul has some work that's not complete yet, so usually the exception to the rule was if one died in a natural death or weren't buried properly. We heard this before, or they were drowned, or death on the battlefield, but their bodies were not retrieved. So now there were spells that were used to placate the dead, to kind of calm them down, to bring them back into the dark, dingy realm from which they came from. Now, upon one's death, there's a spiritual entity known as a Giddim was created. So when you die in ancient Mesopotamia, this would be Samaria, this would be ancient Babylon, this would be the Assyrians. When you die, you become a Giddim. Sorry, a Giddim, excuse me. A Giddim, well, actually is a Giddim and a Giddim. So both right. I love working with consonants. It's a consonant. This Giddim maintained personal identity of the deceased and traveled on to the realm of the land of the dead. But every now and then, some of these Giddim can mischievously slip out of Urkala for visits on Earth, and they harass the dead harass the living for no good reason. These spirits, are not supposed to do so, and they'd be punished by the sun god Shamash by having their funerary offerings taken from them and awarded to the Giddim who had who had no one to remember them on Earth. So that's what you get. You lose your special offerings. It's just it's a pretty dark place. Mesopotamian civilization was very pessimistic. But then they go to ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, a little better, right? However, with ghosts, see, wow, in Mesopotamia, you enter in this dark, dreary realm where you end up squeaking like a bat and eating dirt and sipping from puddles. When you go to ancient Egypt, your afterlife is beautiful if you do great things, right? It's there, crossing over and, rivers and tall grass and meadows, and birds and animals. And hey, you know what? You're arriving. Your little animals that you had as pets will meet you on the shores. That's sweet. Your little kitty you had in life, your little doggy, they're there. It's a happy place. So why would you ever want to return to the land of the living? I can understand the Mesopotamian, ghosts wanting to get out, get them. But why would unless you had unless at the way of the heart ceremony, before Osiris, the great judge, that your heart was, deemed not light as a feather, but, heavy-hearted on those scales. But then again, you're supposed to be swallowed by the great serpent, the great monster of old Amit. So, admittedly, there shouldn't be much left. But then again, there's exceptions where, according to some Egyptian beliefs, there is a darker, dreary afterlife. So it just depends on which Egyptian you want to ask. Still, why would you want to leave? So it's very serious when they come back, right? Very serious. Okay, so what happens is if you're returning to the realm of the field of the reeds, which basically mirrors the life you had in Egypt, enjoying, if you leave the house that you enjoyed, stream by your house, did you know you even get your favorite tree? How nice is that? Your favorite. Does anybody here have a favorite tree? Well, guess what? In the Egyptian afterlife, you get your favorite tree growing by your house. I like that. Anyway, but you return. By the way, when it comes to the soul, you have two components. You got a ba and you got a ka. The ba basically is your spirit. The ka is basically your personality. And after death, you form together and become known as an ak. Okay, anyway, so the return of a ghost would be the ak, the ba and the ka put together. So how does this happen? Once again, we're back to if the proper rites had not been observed after the person's death. The Ak was given a special dispensation by the gods to return to Earth to redress the wrong. Now, this is interesting. So the gods basically say, unlike the Mesopotamian civilization, where the Giddim, they escape, and get punished by Shamash, the sun god. In this case, they go, hey, you know what? Because, the Egyptian gods are a little bit more friendly. We need to go back. We didn't get the right rights. And the Egyptian gods say, yeah, go back and harass them so they do it right. Very nice. Or not so nice. It's still considered very serious. So an example of this would be when misfortune, there's a story here, when misfortune fell upon a widower. It was first attributed to some sin he had hidden from his wife, that she, now all-knowing and dwelling in the realm of the field of reeds, was punishing him for something. So we have discovered a letter from a widower to his dead wife, found in the tomb from the New Kingdom, saying, wait, why are bad things happening to me? Why are you getting at me? He says, He pleads with the spirit of his wife to leave him alone as he is innocent of any wrongdoing. There's no reason you should be harassing me. He says, what wicked thing have I done to you that I should have come to this evil pass? What have I done to you? He continues. But what you have done to me is you have laid hands on me, although I had done nothing wicked to you. From the time I lived with you as your husband down to today, what have I done to you that I need to hide? When you did become sick of the illness of which you had, I caused the master physician to be fetched. I spent 8 months without eating and drinking like a man. I wept exceedingly together with my household in front of my street corner. I gave linen clothes to wrap you and left no benefit undone had to be performed for you. And now, behold, I have spent 3 years alone without entering into a house, though it is not right that one like me should have to do it. This I have done for your sake, but behold, you don't know good from bad. So stop bothering me. I did everything right. So in this case, I don't know what else he needs to do to appease her because she is haunting him. So you see, the ghost is very much alive and well in ancient Egypt. So there you have it. Some temples in ancient Egypt were renowned as centers of dream incubation. This is where the petitioner could pass the night in a special building, and when they dream, they communicate to the gods, but also with the deceased. So it's a special, sanctified, sacred place where you can communicate both with the gods and the dead, right? In fact, obviously, you could even write a letter to those who pass beyond. So, in fact, there's lots of letters that we have found in ancient Egypt, papyrus letters that are written by people who are upset because they seem to have suffered some injustice, and they're writing the dead to help petition, to help them save them, help them out, help me out. So, and so sometimes they'll put the letters in front of their offerings to the dead. They'll put the letters there and have them alongside so the dead can say, hey, can you help me out? I'm having problems with an enemy, or there's a family dispute that's going on. Help me out, please. Okay. So there you have it. Now, there is, of course, there's a few other little stories. One is discovered 1915. Here's a translation of an ancient Egyptian ghost story. In the story, a ghost of a mummified man tells a high priest of the god Amun about his current condition. So here's a ghost who appears to this priest of Amun and says, this is how things are going on the other side. He says, I grew and I did not see the rays of the sun. I did not breathe the air, but darkness was before me every day, and no one came to find me. So he seems to complain of some accident that happened to himself or to a tomb, and he feels, he feels forgotten. So that's a little taste of the Egyptians' ideas of ghosts. In ancient Greece, the afterlife was considered to be in 3 realms. You got the Elysian fields, you got the plain of Asphalto, and you have, of course, Tartarus, where the unrighteous go. And once again, spirits amongst the Greeks return to the living because of, yes, drumroll please, improper burial. And so they seek to communicate this message. Some cases, though, they return not for that reason, but to seek vengeance. They have been wronged. This idea of the vengeance ghost, we're going to see all around the world, no matter if it's in Mesoamerica, whether it be in Southeast Asia or China or Japan, especially, right? Or India or the vengeance ghost, it's a big one, and it's prominent throughout most world cultures. Well, So you see this amongst the Greeks as well as the Romans. Sometimes the ghost is there to provide a prophecy too. And of course, obviously, improper burial. One of the stories that we see from the Iliad is the ghost of Patroclus. This is Achilles' best friend who approaches him and reproaches him for not giving him a proper burial. Now Patroclus appears to Achilles, all in quote, all in his likeness or stature, and lovely eyes and voice, and wore such clothing as Patroclus had worn on his body. So the ghost appears very attractive, just like he sees his friend, right? There he is. But Patroclus is really threatens to do harm to Achilles. He says he's going to haunt him in his dreams until he receives a cremation he requires as an admission to the underworld. And of course, but even though Patroclus looks solid, he does have an ethereal nature because Achilles, it says, with his arms reached out for him, the ghost of Patroclus, but could not take him. The spirit went underground like a vapor and with a thin cry. So he just reaches out, his best friend reaches out, and he just disappears like a vapor. The Odyssey, Homer provides a detailed description of the Greek underworld. And of course, the ghosts are really kind of like shades rather than souls. They lack all possibility of improvement or any kind of redemption. They're just kind of there. In fact, the book 11 of the Odyssey, call it the Book of the Dead. Homer introduces a few more ideas related to ghosts. They are suppliers of information, and they are also chroniclers of the afterlife. So they have a little bit more. Of course, here Odysseus runs into Tiresias, who does, of course, give Odysseus instructions for how to return to his wife and to his home of Ithaca. In addition, Odysseus talks to his dead mother, and she says, "My child, how didst thou come beneath the murky darkness, being still alive? Hard it is for those that live to behold these realms. From between are great rivers and dread streams." It's a very heart-wrenching scene that Homer creates. There's a bottomless, unbridgeable chasm between the ghosts and the living. And of course, obviously, he attempts to hold on to his mother's shade, but what happens is that it doesn't work. She just also fades away. For the sinews no longer hold the flesh and the bones together. The strong might of blazing fire destroys these. As soon as life leaves the white bones, and the spirit, like a dream, flits away and hovers to and fro. Odysseus talks to the unfortunate crew member, Elpenor, who perished in a drunken fall from Circe's rooftop. And what did he do? First thing he says is, "You know what? Did you give me a proper burial? No? Guess what you need to do? Leave me not behind unwept and unburied," right? So you got to bury me. Don't forget. I tell you, make sure, right? Of course, you have other stories besides that too. The Aeneid also goes into the afterlife as well, with its own journey of Aeneas. But there's spirits there too. Now, of course, now what will happen is that we move into the Romans. Let's move towards the Romans here. There is a festival called the Lumeria. It happened on May 9th, 11th, and 13th. This is when the unsettled and the malevolent dead, known as lemurs or larvae, prowl around your house. Now, the problem with the malevolent dead or these unwanted, forgotten dead. The interesting thing about this is that This tradition is also all around the world. Excuse me. This is all also all the way around the world. As you know, we see this also with the hungry ghosts of China, for example. So there you have it. So what do you do with the Romans? Well, what happened is that on 9th, 11th, and the 13th of May, when their idea of the veil being thin for the malevolent or forgotten dead, these lemurs, is a worshiper around midnight. He and his whole household appear. And the head of the household, what he does is he makes a sign with his thumb in the middle of his forehead with washed hands from clean water. And he makes this little mark towards the doorway. And then they throw beans out with averted face, saying 9 times, "These I cast, with thee I redeem me and mine. Haec ego mito is redimo mesque miusque fabis." So you just say this, and what happens is the ghosts apparently, are chasing after the beans. So the lemurs go, "Ooh, we got to get these beans that he threw outside." And then they go around and they clash bronze pots. You can see there's lots of stuff going on here. It'd be worthy of an entire talk, just unpacking that when it comes to tradition. Now we get to it. So now we get to Plautus, who's playwright from 254 to 184 BCE. He writes a comedy, and it's called The Haunted House. It tells how the story of how a rich Athenian merchant named Theopropiatus goes away on business and leaves the operation of his home to his son, Philolochus. And of course, the son now, woohoo, dad's away. I can party, I can play. And so he has all these big parties, and he buys the freedom of a slave girl, and he just spends tons of money. But all of a sudden, guess what's going to happen? Dad returns. He's back. He panics. So what is he going to do? Because his guests, they're still partying in the house. Here comes Dad. So he tells his father that he can't enter the house because it's haunted. That's right. So he tells him that a ghost appeared the dead of night while the torches were still lit, which is kind of strange, and informed him that he was murdered in the house long ago by a villainous host who killed him for his gold. He further says that the corpse of the murdered man is still hidden in the house. It's dangerous for everyone to enter. Don't go in, Dad. Yeah. Dad believed his father bought the story hook, line, and sinker. That is until the money lenders showed up demanding payment for the loan he did in order to buy the slave girl her freedom, and the Duke was up. But there you have it. Oh well. There's another one. This story is really interesting because it's not. No, we're doing the playwright here. This is a story by Phlegon of Tralles from the 2nd century, and this story claims to be true. This is a claimed true ghost story. So it's about Philinnion. Philinnion was married to one of Alexander the Great's generals, Paterus, and she dies about 6 months after their marriage. And so the story goes is that she returns to life and she visits a youth by the name of Machiatus every night in his room at her parents' house. So he is a visitor staying at her parents' house. She's deceased. And so she visits him. Okay, so the story begins with a nurse of the house, who would have, of course, raised Philinnion, peeks and sees her sitting on Machiatus' his bed, and runs to tell her parents. And so what happens is that she goes off and she tells her mom Philinian's mom, and of course the mom freaks out. She faints, then she comes to, and then she thinks that the nurse is making it all up. And but what happens is eventually they take a peek, and she peered in, and through, I'm reading this, and though she recognized her daughter's clothes and features, inasmuch as she could not determine the truth of the matter, she decided to do nothing further that night. She planned to get up in the morning and confront the girl, or if she should be too late for that, she intended to question Bacchaeus thoroughly about everything. Okay, so she wakes up the next morning at dawn, right? And turns out that this girl that could be her daughter left unnoticed. So she confronts him, this guest in her home, and he relates everything to her. He did reveal that her name, she said her name was Philinian. He told how her visits began, how great her desire was for her and for his in return. And then he shows a golden ring that he got from her, as well as the breastband that she had left the night before. And of course, the mom freaks out, utters out a cry, and goes, "It's my daughter's." So, is she going to come again? Yeah, she's going to come again. We'll be waiting for her. So the next night came, and it was the hour when Finidian was accustomed to come to him. Deities pretended that nothing was wrong. And they sat together, they ate, had something to drink. So, so, so he supposed that some grave robbers had dug into the tomb and maybe sold the clothes and gold to her father. Maybe that was it, right? So what happens is that here comes the servants waiting, sees it, goes off and fetches the mom and the husband, and they confront. Guess what? It is Finidian. And she is upset. And she says, "You have grudged my being from with the guest for 3 days of my father's house." So she says, "I have caused no one any pain. For this reason, on account of your meddling, you shall grieve all over again. I shall return to the place appointed for me. For it was not without divine will that I came here." And immediately upon speaking these words, she was dead. Whoa. Okay. So this is believed to be a true story because the person who's writing it is saying, yeah, well, he said the event was quickly heard throughout the city and was reported to me. So accordingly, during the night, I kept in check the crowds and gathered at the house. Since with news like this going from mouth to mouth, I wanted to make sure there would be no trouble. At early dawn, the town assembly was full. After the particulars have been explained, it was decided that we should go first to the tomb, open it, and see what's inside. You know what they found inside? The girl's body was not there, but they did find the iron cup. Sorry, so did find, excuse me, the iron ring that he had given to her as a gift in exchange for the gold ring, as well as the wine cup that they shared together. And then of course they went back to the house, and they realized that this is the body, and they're like, so this is a ghost story that was considered true in ancient times. It's kind of cool, right? But yeah, so now the next little bit here we're going to talk about is that, of course, there's a few other stories, and I want to talk about this one here. It's a very important one, and you realize in these stories, these are Roman stories, and yet they sound so familiar. Yeah, they sound like our ghost stories. So ghost stories haven't changed all that much in 2,000 years. We're still telling the same kind of stories. This one especially is interesting. It's reported by Pliny the Younger, and it's concerning a philosopher by the name of Athenodorus. Athenodorus, Pliny lived from 61 to 115. Athenodorus, the story goes, he comes to Athens, and he hears of a haunted house. And you know what? It's going very cheaply because nobody wants to live in a haunted house. So Athenodorus, he rents the house, and at night he hears the rattling of chains and wakes up to find a man in his room. Now, what happens here, right? He says, in the dead of night, a noise was frequently heard resembling the clashing of iron, which, if you listen carefully, sounded like the rattling of chains. The noise, I'm still quoting, would seem to be a distance away, but it would start coming closer and closer and closer. And he has a way of going for the dramatic here. Immediately after this, the specter would appear in the form of an old man, emaciated and squalid, with bristling hair and a long beard, and rattling the chains on his hands and feet as he moved. So this is what Athenodorus saw. Yeah, so what he did is, so he looked, and he actually at first he's a philosopher. He's just kind of writing away, kind of ignoring the ghost. And the ghost is like, ooh, shaking chains. He's ignoring it. Ooh, shaking chains. And he goes right over his head. It says, and shakes his chain. Ooh. I just, a good philosopher. He just gotta, I'm just gonna be focused on my writing. So I ignore this guy. But what he does, he wants the ghost close enough to really observe uh, from a more defined proximity, and he realizes that it's holding its finger up. It's giving the finger, the finger moving, the moving finger, right? And and so it's like, oh, maybe you want me to follow you, and it goes to another part of the house. He picks up his lamp. He follows him to the courtyard, and at a certain place in the courtyard, the ghost disappears. So Athenodorus, carefully marks the spot where the ghost vanished with a handful of leaves and grass. And then what he does is he goes to the magistrate and asks if he can dig up where this ghost disappeared. So they dug right there, and they found bones, bare bones that were corroded by fetters, right? And so then, of course, the bones were given a proper burial, and the ghost never returned. So, wow, you got the chain rattling ghost back into the first century. Goes back. Oh, look, it's not really a ghost story, but I got to tell you, there's in the first century we have a werewolf story. Guess what? Same thing. It's a full moon. Petronius talks about it on the Satyricon. Basically, a man is going from Rome to a villa in the country. He wants to visit his mistress, and a soldier joins him. And then suddenly, the soldier takes off his clothes and turns into a wolf and goes off and basically starts ravaging the nearby sheep. So he kind of leaves and he goes on to Rome. And then he finds the same soldier being treated for a wound. And the man realizes the soldier is a shapeshifter. I think this is kind of interesting because, again, it's a full moon. He makes his transformation. He attacks sheep, yada, yada. Okay. Another story. This story we won't go too much into, but Plutarch tells a story, 45 to 120, a place called Caronia, Greece. This, again, is considered a true story. A guy by the name of Damon. Basically, Damon there's this basically a commander of the army, and he makes advances toward Damon, who is just a boy, or I should say a teenager. And what he does is that he kills him and then flees and then gets in with a bunch of thieves, and they start harassing the town. And so the city council meets, and they decide that these thieves and Damon, of course, who's with them, are supposed to be killed. And so what happens is that they sneak in the middle of the night and kill the city council members. That'll teach them. And then eventually they go, okay, well, this is a problem. So eventually, uh, Licinius Lucilius says, you know what? Maybe the commander deserved what happened to him when it came to the crime. He's not absolved. The city, you're absolved. And what happens is that it, they make a ruse. They say, hey, Damon, it looks like the General Luxolus has forgiven you. And why don't you come to the baths and enjoy a great celebration? You've been exonerated. And what they do is they kill him in the baths. So why would I even tell that story? Well, what happens is this, is that the bathhouse all of a sudden had the ghost of Damon, and they couldn't get rid of it. He was everywhere. Um, and so Damon, what happened is that for a long while, it says after apparitions continued to be seen and groans to be heard in that place. So our fathers have told us. They ordered the gates of the baths to be built up. And even to this day, those who live in the neighborhood believe that they sometimes see specters and hear alarming sounds. Ooh, so we have another haunted dating complex, right? Now, do you think you don't have anything on Romeo and Juliet? You want to hear of an even more tragic story than Romeo and Juliet? This one's told by Appius. Get ready for this story that's also a ghost story. So, what happened is, I'm going to just tell you once upon a time, there's a man by the name of Thrasyllus, and he falls in love with Charite. The problem is that Charite is the wife of his best friend, Telepomus. So what does he do? What does Thrasyllus do to get Charite? So he says, hey, best buddy, do you want to go hunting? Let's go on a hunting expedition. So they go off hunting. And then what he does is he kills him. He murders him. He murders Charite's husband. So immediately the husband shows himself as an apparition before Charite and says, guess what? My best buddy, first of all, number one, he's in love with you. Number two, he killed me. Number three, if there's a three, he's on his way. So what happens is that, he shows up. He shows up, and he basically guy has his nerve. He wants to have a nice conversation with her after giving her the news that husband is dead. She's faking, acting like she doesn't know, what happened, and says, well, maybe you could see me later on tonight. So what, of course, happens is that he shows up later on tonight. They have a drink together. He puts something in his drink. He falls asleep. She takes her hairpin out and she punctures both his eyes. Now he's blind. And then she goes off to her husband's tomb. Apparently, he got buried a short period of time between day and evening. And she put herself in the tomb. And right beside the body of her husband, she plunges his sword into her chest. Meanwhile, the blind wannabe lover somehow finds his way to the tomb. I don't know, maybe somebody led him there. And he opens up the tomb and he shuts the tomb after him. And then he starves himself and dies. So that's a beautiful story. You got the dead husband, you got the wife who killed herself, and you got the lover who killed the husband, and he stars himself to death. These are great stories. What do you think? But these are Roman ghost stories, right? So there's quite a few of these, right? I mean, you got there's other stories Appius talks about, and I can just refer to a few over here. One is that there was a miller's wife who was fooling around, and her husband found out about it, and so wanted to not be with her anymore. And so what she does, this is interesting. What she does is she goes to a sorceress, and she is asked to bring up a ghost of a woman that had suffered in life. She had been murdered and had a lot of vengeance in her. And so, and what did the wife ask this raised ghost to do, brought up by the sorceress? Can you go to my husband and say, hey, you either forgive me, and if he doesn't forgive me and bring me back to the household, then just kill him, murder him. And so what happens is the ghost of the vengeful lady, which is interesting because it kind of feels like, hey, this is like the same kind of idea, the trope that we see in Japanese ghosts, right? The ghost that can kill you. And the Romans have it. So what happens is that the ghost appears. Will you forgive your wife? And he says no. And she says, why don't you come into this room? And he goes into the room, and of course, the ghost kills him and hangs him by a noose. And that's the end of him. I mean, you got vengeful ghosts, I gotta tell you, right? So there you have it. It's interesting because it describes her as having tear-stained rags. She's half clothed. Her feet are bare, unprotected. Her face looks like a pale boxwood. In fact, she has gray, disheveled hair sprinkled with ashes. In fact, her hair's covering her face, and it's so interesting because it is so close to the Japanese vengeance ghost. Almost ridiculous. One wonders, could there be any connections between them, right? And we'll finish off the Romans with this story, and then we're going to go other places. Lucian writes a story, and I love it. It's called The Liar. And what happens is everybody's sitting around telling ghost stories. That's all they're doing. So they're telling these stories. One, it's not really a ghost story. Talks about the fact that that I saw this goddess. I heard this thunderclap. This terrible woman approaching, not much less than 300 feet high. She carried a torch in her left hand and a sword in her right. The sword might be 30 feet long. Her lower extremities were those of a dragon, but the upper half was like Medusa. Instead of hair, she had clusters of snakes writhing about her neck and curling over her shoulders. So you see this, and of course he says that he saw that Hades opened up, and he saw Hades, and he saw various loved ones, and then of course the people who are listening to the story are saying, "Hey, did you see Plato?" He's like, "No, I didn't see Plato. I don't think I did, but I think I saw Socrates down there in the depths of Hades. I think I saw him." Clearly, this guy is making up the story. Okay, so the next story, though, gets interesting. The next story is Cleodemus says, he's telling his story. He says that I had been ill and I had a fever for 7 days. And I woke up to find a handsome young man standing at my side in a white cloak. He raised me up from the dead and conducted me through a sort of chasm into Hades. He describes himself going to the judgment hall, and there he saw Charon, the Fates, the Furies. But when Pluto saw him, according to the story, Pluto flew into a rage and he says, "Away with him. His thread is not yet out. Go and fetch Dimulus, the smith. He has had his spindle full and more." And so what happened is the messenger of the dead went and got the wrong guy. The messenger of the dead was actually supposed to go to the neighbor, and who happened to be the smith. So he came back, according to the story, and says, "Hey, guess what? I think that Dimulus is as, quote, good as dead." And of course, not long after they heard the mourning next door, So, so this is the case where the messenger of the dead took the wrong ghost. You got to pay attention to the address. You gotta love this. I mean, this is a fun, weird, and a story, right? There's another story where you know he loved this one man. He loved his saintly wife, who's also the mother to his children. He says, I showered treatment of her in such display, not only in her lifetime, but even after her death. For I ordered all the jewels and clothes that she had valued to be burnt upon her pyre. So he did everything. He gave a huge funeral, loved her in life, gave her everything in death. And you know what? She appeared to him. There she was. He's excited, like, wow, she's alive. I threw my arms about her neck and wept out loud. She bade me cease. It's like, what? And complained that though I had consulted her wishes and everything else, I had neglected to burn one of her golden sandals, which she said had fallen under the chest. What? And he mentioned the fact, yeah, we only found one of her golden sandals. We couldn't find the other. And so she came back from the dead and said, hey, you know what, buddy? I want the other sandal. So, so he goes and he burns the other sandal. And then he doesn't return anymore. I guess that takes care of it, right? So they're just telling these stories over and over again. And of course, you have the skeptic listening to these stories, right? And they think he's crazy for not believing in the supernatural. And they think that, I mean, they're telling these stories of this one Egyptian magician who takes a broom, he dresses it up with clothes, and suddenly the broom comes alive, and comes alive and does all your errands for you, and fetches water. It's kind of cool, right? And then he says a magic word, and the broom turns back into a broom again. So it's kind of a ghost story, kind of not. So this one guy, he listens into the magician. He decides to do the same thing. He dresses up a broom, says the same magic spell, and yes, this broom goes back and forth fetching water, and then he keeps fetching water and doesn't stop. He does a spell to make it stop. It still keeps going. So he breaks the broom in half, and now there's two brooms fetching water, and everything, the whole house is being filled with water. The magician comes and says, hey, you know what, buddy, you just don't know how to work magic. All right. So in some cases, it's translated as a pestle. So now, after this conversation, of course, what happens is they have this argument about what is true or not. And the idea is that everybody believes in the supernatural. This gentleman is a complete skeptic. It kind of tells you a little bit about where people all happen to be at that time. So let's move on to China. We're in China now. So that's the Romans, right? Now, in Chinese culture, once again, a person who was drowned or who died alone or died in battle or suffered some other death where they went unburied, once again, would appear bodily. And it could only be seen by torchlight in this case. There was, of course, the story of Tupu. Tupu was an ancient Chinese ghost with revenge on his mind. Before his death, Tupu served as a minister to the Chinese Emperor Sui, who ruled from 827 to 783 BCE. They had a disagreement, and the emperor had him killed. And of course, there was a warning before he was killed. He said, I'm going to haunt you. Well, he did more than haunt the emperor. In fact, 3 years after his death, the emperor was killed with an arrow fired by an apparition resembling Tupu in front of an assembly of feudal lords. Whoa, so this ghost was able to, wow, kill you, right? Well, okay, so ghosts, of course, are considered reality by the ancient Chinese and even the modern Chinese. Chinese philosopher Moti, 470 391 BC, argued in favor of accepting the report of ghosts. the reality as well as the story of Tupu, that he did exist, that this did happen. In fact, he declared, if from antiquity to the present, and since the beginning of man, there are men who have seen the bodies of ghosts and spirits and heard their voices, how can we say that they do not exist? So the idea is, since there's a testimony from reputable witnesses, how can we doubt this? Following this right line of reasoning, then one should accept what it is said about ghosts. He says, if those who tell one about them can be trusted in what they have said about other things in life, that one can verify for oneself. So there you have it. Now, the Chinese belief in ghosts was heavily influenced by ancestor worship, and the belief that they can still continue to influence you afterwards. There is, of course, the Ghost Festival, which originated to honor and appease the dead, and of course, this Day of the Dead. You also have the story of the hungry ghosts. These are ancestors returning to their houses at a certain time of year and are, well, hungry, ready to eat. On the 15th night of the 7th month, the Chinese celebrate the Ghost Festival. And here, of course, heaven and hell are believed to be very thin. And what they will do is there's various activities during this month, which include preparing ritualistic food offerings, burning incense and burning joss paper, and so forth. People burn, also money known as hell notes to give cash for those in the underworld. They'll burn paper houses and cars and servants and other things to please the ghosts of the underworld. But these hungry ghosts are kind of forgotten. These hungry ghosts are the ones who are not only forgotten, were forgotten, or they did not have a proper burial, or they were bad. And so it is said that they have needle-thin necks and very large mouths. Whatever they put in their mouths turns to ash. Yikes. So there's a special festival to give them nourishment, to feed them, and so forth. So let's tell a story. Let's tell a Chinese ghost story. I love the story of Ning and Ye. Ning and Ye. So this goes back to 1680 CE, although the story was much earlier. The story is that there is this Ning, and he visits a temple, and because he's a very proper man, he's visiting the temple, and he's visited by the ghost of the maiden Ni, and she tries to seduce him, but he resists, owing to his virtuous conduct. Now, there happen to be two other travelers that come to stay at the temple, and they are both found dead next day with holes pierced in the soles of their feet and their blood completely drained. Ooh, yikes. So Ni comes to respect Ning's virtue in resisting her advances. And so she confides in him and says that she died in the temple when she is only 18 years old and came under the control of a monstrous demon who happened to inhabit the grounds where she was buried. This monster required her to seduce travelers, drain them of their blood, and then feed the blood to him. Well, Ning digs up Ni's remains and carries them home with him. And then what he does is he reburies them in a proper way near his house. He pours out a libation on the grave as a sign of respect and honor. So he gave her appropriate rites in a new location. So he leaves, and all of a sudden he hears his voice call out to him. It's like, what? Wait, I think I hear her voice. Ning! Ning! He turns around, and there's Ni. Because of his virtuous actions, she has returned to life. they're in love. Ying and Yang marry, and the story goes they live happily ever after and have children. You didn't see that one coming. A ghost story with a happy ending, right? Oh boy. Okay, of course, Chinese ghost stories often carry a moral along the lines of the legend of Yin and Yang, emphasizing virtuous behavior and kindness. Confucius himself uh, believed in the importance of ghost stories because he felt the lessons learned from supernatural encounters could instill proper virtues in the living. He felt this was even true with the encounters of the so-called hungry ghosts. So let's move over to Japan. Japan, well, here the ghosts are known as, well, there's lots of ghosts, but the ones we'll be focusing on, because this is a scary one that's always featured in Japanese horror, and those are the Yuri. The Yuri, basically, what happens is that when you die, you get a proper burial, and you don't return, right? The Yuri, I mean, the idea is you die, your spirit soul goes to recon. There's a purgatory, there's a proper funeral. But what happens if you are murdered? What happens if you commit suicide? What happens if the proper rites are not performed? Or what happens if you have, don't you dare have this, powerful emotions at the moment of your death? Because if you have powerful emotions, excuse me, at the moment of your death, that powerful emotion will move into your afterlife. Now, it could be, let's do glass half full, maybe. But if you are feeling so much love and devotion, or just love, that love will cross over to the other side. And you, as a Yuri, will not only still love who you're in love with or who you didn't have a chance to be with, but you're going to haunt them. Yeah, because the last thing you thought about is love for them. And now that attaches you to them. And ooh, you'll be haunting. What if you're filled with hate? That which you hate, or who you will hate, right? Last thought is that it transcends into a Yuri who then goes and attacks those who they hate. Sorrow, same thing. Revenge, beware of the vengeful spirit, Yuri. So they may return. So this is kind of scary, right? So you got to watch what you think. Now, at first, these ghosts during the Han period, which is 794 to 1185, they just look just like us. Yeah, they're solid. If you see a woman, it just looks like a woman, just like a normal woman happen. Later on, they got to make them more sinister. So during the Tokugawa period, 1603 to 1868, now all of a sudden they become pale-faced, and typically vengeful spirits are women, which for some strange reason in Japanese culture, there's hardly any male vengeful spirits, but mostly women. They're pale-faced, messy black hair, sometimes covering their face, wearing a white burial kimono, and they have no feet at all. The agony of the feet, right? So, and so they can appear. And the worst part is, Japanese ghosts can kill you. They can take your life. They have these scary powers. Usually, these spirits are of women, but those who are also, if they're male, they're those who are poor, who had no power in life. I want to get back, but usually it's women. What kind of scary powers? Well, one story is there was a jilted lover who died, and she was so angry, she burned all of Tokyo in her rage. Wow, that's pretty vengeful. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they can kill you. They can cause tidal waves. They can cause great fires. They can cause the weather to change. They can cause you to be struck by lightning, which just connects to the idea of Shintoism And of course, the bonds, the Mucibi bonds that connect again, and the Kentai and the Yukai put together, these. And so one thing affects the other, and this is not a good thing. So they can kill you. Now, also, I want to tell you something that's interesting. Oh, there's, of course, yeah. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a game I used to play that you may have fun doing. You guys ready? Here's a fun game in Japan. Now, I apologize if I don't say the word correctly. It's called the Haya Kumogatari Keidenakai, Hyakumonogatari, this word, Kaidankai. Okay, so what is this? This means a gathering of 100 supernatural tales. This is like so. Basically, it started amongst the samurai, the upper class, and then moved to became popular to everybody else. And what you do is you have three rooms. You have one main room and another main room, and there's a room in between. It's got to be three rooms. So what you do ahead of time is that in the third room, what you do is you get these lamps. They're called andons. These are kind of like basically paper that's stretched over bamboo. These paper lamps, and you put 100 of these lamps in the third room. Okay, it's kind of strange, along with a table and a mirror that's set on the table. So what do you do now? Everybody goes into the first room, making sure that the second room that connects the two together is doors are open, so you can see from the first room to the second and third. Okay, so what is that about? So the idea is you sit around in the first room and you tell ghost stories. Okay. And the idea is you tell ghost stories, really spooky ones. And after each person tells a ghost story, then they go into the third room and they put out one of the lights. Now remember, all the rooms are dark. So except for the lights. So I forgot to mention that. All the rooms, all the lights have to be turned off. So all the lights are coming from these lamps in the third room. So after you tell every story, one at a time, you go and see. I tell a story, and ooh, that was scary. Then you go to the other room and you take out one of the lamps. I got 99. Next person tells their story, goes to the other room. Now there's 98. Of course, you have to return back to the other room because you can't have 100 people. So the idea is that as you tell the ghost stories, it gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And when you get, this is like a guts game, when you get towards the 90s, then it's possible for an apparition to appear. But whatever you do, don't take out all 100. You do, there's supposedly a ghost that will appear, the specter of one of the stories, one of the stories that you told will come and visit you and may have some rather dark ideas. Is that an interesting story? Yeah, okay. Japanese ghost game, I should say. Now we move on to India. Here are the ghosts of the departed. Many times were seen as hungry ghosts. The Indian ghosts were oftentimes known as bhoots. They appear as humans, but they have backwards feet. So their feet are on backwards, and they appear without warning. The backward feet is a symbol that something has gone terribly wrong. Bhoots materialize when a person dies before their ordained time on earth. And so they possess sometimes they're the spirit, sometimes they're viewed as a demon, either way. But usually the bhoots, once again, are women who had died, in this case, in childbirth. And so the idea is if the living person was a woman, this bhoot, known as a Kurrail, would seek to steal her children or try to possess her body. And if a man, it would seek to seduce and then kill him. You know, this booths are very similar in many ways. You guys know the stories that we see in Mexico, right? So, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But what about Southeast Asia? Well, Southeast Asia, animism lingers here. I won't tell all the Southeast Asia stories, but I do want to mention Indonesia. Uh, they have what's called the Hantu Penanggalan. This is a kind of a female vampire. It has long hair flowing down her head, which which floats, and below that head, there's nothing but her trachea, her stomach, and her entrails, which are dragged along with her. That's kind of scary. This kind of ghost is known also not only in Indonesia, it's in the Philippine Islands, it's in Thailand, it's in Laos, it's in Cambodia. So watch out. They're vampire. They're going to kill you. They're oftentimes they're floating by your house window. Ooh, or you see them going through the forest out for your blood. Another one is called the Pontianak, Pontianak. This is again a spirit of a woman who died while pregnant. Once again, Southeast Asia, and in the same locations that I just mentioned in Southeast Asia. So you can recognize them because their eyes are red and they're dressed in white. And what they do is you smell them and they smell this beautiful floral aroma and they come up to you. And sometimes they're able to transform themselves into a beautiful woman, sometimes a friendly little animal. And they come up to you and suddenly they manifest. And then what they do is with their sharp fingernails, they will reach out and rip out your stomach. Oh, that's scary. Yeah. So there you have it. Oh, in the Philippine Islands, they have another version of this where it's not a woman, it's a baby. And so you hear this baby crying, you know, and it's basically these are babies that were stillborn, and they're the Hanchu. So you hear a baby crying in the forest, wah, wah, and maybe you don't want to visit because what happens, they do the same thing. I don't know, it's scary. Is you go up to this baby like, this smells good. Oh, this little baby, and the baby goes, and it actually pulls your stomach out too. You know, sometimes though it grabs, it bites you in the neck and rips your neck out. Anyway, it's very peaceful there. So the idea for all these is you find a nail and plunge it into the back of their necks. So, whew. Now what about the Mayans? You guys having fun yet? The Mayans, they also have lingering ghost stories said to inhabit Bengar. You know, so and they don't like this realm, and so you got to keep them there through charms and amulets. You got to you know. So sometimes a gatekeeper or a shaman wards off these spirits who are in the Mayan underworld known as Chibalba, where the numerous lords of the dead are there, who could trick the soul of the deceased as it sought its way towards paradise. That's great. So you could go to a good place, but the lords of the death of the dead may not let you do that as you descend into the underworld. But if you do manage to get through, you reach the tree of life, and then finally you climb up to paradise. So you got a choice. But I'm going to tell you a story. Here it is. Now, the Mayan also believe that when you die, you can also turn into a plant and a flower. Now, there's a story, the legend of Sitba, which tells the story of two beautiful women. There's Shitban and Utskolo. Shitban, sorry to say it right too, was treated poorly by respected people of the town because she had engaged in unlawful intercourse with various men, outside of marriage. But she was loved by the lower classes because of her goodness of heart and her kindness to all. And she was very generous. Then there's Utskalol, and she was highly regarded by the upper classes because she came from a great pedigree and observed all the social etiquette. She was hard-hearted and cruel and cared for nobody but herself. One day, Shitdom, I don't want to say the name because it sounds like something else, but one day, the wonderful the wonderful lady, who was the prostitute, we'll just know that. One day, there was a strange intoxicating fragrance filling the village, and it smelled absolutely beautiful. And it turned out to be coming from this lady, Shitbon. And shortly after this, Utskolol died. But from her, there was this terrible odor, awful smell. And then when they died, for Shitbon, you had obviously a beautiful flower that came as a result of this. But for Utskolol, it was a prickly flower without scent. Well, Utskolol is pretty jealous, and she's in the afterlife. So what she does is that she says, well, how come she who did what she did is being honored, and it's the beautiful flower. What about me? So what she does, you get it, is that she returns to Earth as this angry ghost, and she waits for various travelers at the crossroads. If a man pays attention to her, she seduces and then kills him. If a traveler is a woman, she punishes her by afflicting her peace of mind. Now, of course, what happens now is this story of the Mayans goes to the Aztecs, who have a similar entity in their own beliefs. And this is a spirit known as Kiyototo. This is the ghost of a woman who died in childbirth. These spirits also haunt the crossroads. They ignore male travelers, but they wait for women with children and then struck the women down and steal their children away. And then, of course, this story goes into the modern story of La Llorona, right? La Llorona, who is the weeping woman, who, if you light a red candle, she will appear. Sometimes she'll appear if children are misbehaving, so they better behave, right? Or, and what happened is there's various backstories. Some stories say that, she was married to this man, and this man didn't love her and wanted the wild life of parties. And so he goes off, although he always showered their children with lots of gifts and seemed affectionate to them, but not to her. And some versions of the story, what she does is, she kills her own children. She drowns them. But then she's in trouble for that. And so she's doomed to wander this realm of purgatory, looking for her lost children and so forth, right? According to the Catholic version of the story, Maria her name was Maria. She's refused entry into heaven. So there you have it. Lots of great stories. And obviously this kind of trickles into other stories related to, of course, dogs could see ghosts, and they were the custodians or guardians of those who crossed over to the other side. Obviously, the Day of the Dead, De los Muertos, right? Obviously, this is a special time. And it's similar to Samhain. I know we don't have time to talk about all the details about Samhain, but I did so already in my Halloween talk. So just listen to a Halloween talk, and you can go there. But this is a time when the veil is relatively thin, and they cross over to the other side in the Celtic lore, right? Let's go to Africa. Africa, it's the same things. It's the same kind of stories in sub-Saharan Africa, with an interesting variation, especially West Africa. West Africa, you have we're called the Yombos, or the Bumbi, or the Duppies in Jamaica. They become known as the Duppies. These are like fairy-like creatures with silver hair, and they sometimes mimic humans. They love singing. They want to a food offering. At first, it's interesting because they're thought of as white in complexion, but white and scary pale white. So when the Europeans arrived in West Africa, they thought at first that maybe they were Yumbis or Vumbi, and then they realized, oh, no, they're not. But it's interesting because in West African folklore, fairies and ghosts overlap. Huh? How does that work? So in some cases, these fairies are also, drumroll please, the souls of the dead. And what happens is you become this fairy-like being, again known as a Yumbi or a Buma or a Dupi, right? And you end up being 2 feet tall. You eat, you drink like everybody else, you go fishing, but you live underground. You live in these underground villages, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear the beating of drums of the Yumbis from their underground realms. Every now and then, they come out and they steal food or they steal fire, and they go back down under the earth again. There's a story of one hunter that follows a porcupine. He goes beneath the earth and he comes upon an underground village, and there he sees many of his deceased family members who have become these enchanted beings. I kind of think that's cool, but they're happy. They're so good to dance around. A lot of them are happy, not all of them. Quite a few are happy. As we go towards East Africa, a little less happy. You know, Tanzania. You got the Chaga tribe. Ghosts really visit you in dreams. That's kind of good. But other ones you have, of course, they fear. There's a great fear of the dead, and they have to be appeased. You see, what happens is that in when you get to East Africa, humans, we have two aspects of our soul. We have our visible part and our invisible part. In some cases, it's called a tippo. And when you die, your visible part of your soul dies, but your tippo, the invisible part, becomes a spirit, but it becomes more intelligent and powerful than ever in your previous life. And so you have knowledge that nobody else, nobody has living, because you have a knowledge of everything. So you got to make sure that you placate those spirits, because you thought they weren't that bright when they're living. Guess what? They're bright now, and they know you didn't treat them right, and they're going to be after you, right? And so what happens is that if you don't treat them right, they could become a yoking, excuse me, which is a demon. And of course, you don't want that to happen. So that's in Africa. Well, we move into the Middle Ages, right? So we kind of covered quite a few of the continents. I wish we could, cover them all, but time is a little bit limited. So, and there's various stories. The story of the bath keeper is a very early one from the 10th century, mid 10th century. And basically, you have this priest. He's going to the baths, and there's a bath attendant who's always taking care of him. He thinks this guy's pretty cool, and so when he on his third visit, he gives him 2 Eucharist loaves, and the man says, "No, I can't receive them because I'm actually dead. I am the former overseer of the baths." He's all, "I just want you to pray on my behalf so I can cross over into the afterlife." The priest prays and he crosses over. So there's other stories besides that too. You have the story from 1091, which talks about the ghostly processions that crossed over England and other places. Everybody's mounted on horses, and these are the riders of the dead, and they have done something wrong in life. And so they're caught in this purgatorial like existence, but what they're doing is wandering around in these processions. And so the knights are riding, and others, the peasants behind, and people are in wagons. And apparently, he came across this guy by the name of Wonkin came across one of these horrifying scenes, and is actually attacked by one of them. And one of them was his brother, and says, "Can you pray for me? I was a knight. I did some bad things, and now I'm stuck this way." Right. So that's kind of sad. There's also fragments of a 14th century manuscript telling basically it's a monk of Violet. And this is a series of ghost stories. Yes, from the 14th century. So one story says a man was trying to make his way home with a load of beans after his horse meets with an accident. He sees a terrifying apparition of a horse, and after he tries to scare it away, it begins to stalk him. The spirit then appears as a glowing ball of light in a cloud of hay. Finally, the man confronts the spirit in the name of the Lord, and a ghostly figure appears in front of him. The spirit claims that it means the man no harm and asks to carry his load of beans for him. The man agrees, and the load is carried across the river. And then, of course, the spirit vanishes. Well, it's very nice of that spirit, right? There is, of course, other stories too. There's a how spirit, but there's actually, we don't have a lot of time to read through these stories. But there you have it. Lots of medieval stories. Of course, you have obviously stories of haunted ships like the Flying Dutchman, right? It started sometime during the 17th century. It's first mentioned by John MacDonald. The story goes that there was this ship that was trying to approach the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, and the pilot wasn't able to get to safe harbor, and there was a storm, and it disappeared. And then every now and then, this ship would appear. As time went on, they started to create motive. So by the time we get to John Wright in 1803, they said, well, the reason why the ship didn't make it and then kept reappearing is because, hey, he must have done some kind of crime. By the time of 1821, in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine, his name is Von der Decken. And basically, in this case, he refused to go into safe harbor because he is going to make sure that they get to their destination. And he shook his fist, or in some case, his pistol at the winds and said, I will do this. You know, and he would say, may I be eternally damned if I don't do this. And of course, he's eternally damned. And of course, the ghost ship appears in different places. The Flying Dutchman. Of course, this course goes over to the story of the Sarah Soul, another ghost ship. People like ghost ships, but basically the story is pretty short. You got this guy, he loves this lady, but this other guy loves the lady also. They fight about it, and the one person who's less hot-headed and more calm basically gets the girl, and he's all happy about it, and he christens his ship and names it the Sarah Soul after her. He's all happy, and then of course the jilted would-be lover follows his ship, and then he's like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble!" And then because his ship is unarmed, and so he fires cannons, and then he boards the ship, and he kills the crew, and he ties the person who was Sarah's beloved to the mast. And then what happens is that obviously he's supposed to be left to die, with this dead crewman around him. Well, as it turns out, apparently the crew, they all come back to life. And then they steer the ship into safe harbor. And they actually, supposedly, people see this, supposedly untie him from the mast. And then they bring him to land. And then the ghost of his former crew then go back on the ship and disappear. You gotta love these stories. So sightings of the Sarah were said to happen for quite a long time. So, those stories permeate throughout the 19th century as well. Of course, even Abraham Lincoln was not immune to being connected with ghost stories, and you have the rise of spiritualism during this period of time, but you also have the rise of skepticism. So, but spiritualism, basically, Emmanuel Swedenborg, along with Franz Mesmer, and their ideas, are brought together by Andrew Jackson Davis, and they put together this belief system called spiritualism. And it's manifested supposedly by the Fox sisters. And so now you have this belief that, hey, you know what? You can get together at a seance and communicate and see these ghosts and be in their presence. Even though, of course, the Fox sisters later on recanted their views, their beliefs in 1888, but then they changed their mind because then they lost all their profits and died in poverty. At least 2 out of 3 sisters did. But spiritualism was on the rise, and then of course, you gotta love the entrepreneur spirit of of America, the United States. This is maybe a little bit of sarcasm here because getting a medium, putting together, around the table, getting people gathered together, and so the medium wants to be paid, and there's got to be an easier way, and instant gratification. So they have these talking boards. First the planchette, which by the way, this planchette goes back to China. It's traced back to 1100 CE. Anyway, the planchette was popular, but the talking boards are more specific, with the letters all kind of put together. And of course, this eventually became the Ouija board, right? By the turn of the 20th century, right? And it becomes the kind of the game to have, right? The Ouija board wasn't looked at as too much nefarious, just calling on your loved ones, and it was actually marketed as a dating game. You call your beloved, and you get together with her, and you say, hey, come on over. We got a Ouija board, and then you kind of sit with her with the little planchette, and you guys touch hands. Oh, this is nice and romantic. You're love. Learning about each other. But then, of course, The Exorcist comes out. In '74, what happens? The Ouija board is depicted as this opening up portals for demons, and after that point, now the Ouija board becomes a demon summoning thing, which is not so great. So things do change, but skepticism is on the rise, and I wish I could talk about skepticism. I do want to talk about Charles Dickens. He was part of these various groups known as the Ghost Club. It was founded in 1862, and we're not sure where he's at. Some cases he seems to believe it's psychological phenomena, and in other cases he seems to not believe. Sometimes he believes it is something that's supernatural. So we're not sure where he's at. He kind of plays both sides. And then you have the rise of the Societal for Psychical Research that rises up in 1882, and then the American version of it. And so people start questioning the existence of ghosts and so forth. So where do we go from here? Yeah, now I got to wrap up. Not like a ghost, but we do have to wrap up a little bit. And I will just say that, all right, so where do we go from here? Now, what is it? I mean, we do know that Carl Jung did believe in ghosts, but exactly what they are, we're not sure. But he did believe in some aspects of it. I have all the Carl Jung stories right here if you want to ask me about it later on. Those are pretty good ones. But let's go to conversations about ghosts today. So here we go. So this is our wrap up. Let's talk about views of ghosts. So the neuroscientist by the name of Michael Persinger, he's born in 1945, still living, argued that anything paranormal or spiritual in general might be efficiently explained by universal physical mechanizations or mechanisms. He's from the University of Canada, so Laurentian to the University of Canada. So he says that experiences with ghosts or supernatural phenomena were often associated with non-local interactions between human brain activity and geophysical processes. He noted that individuals experience geomagnetic activity 2 to 3 days before the paranormal event, with this geomagnetic activity connected to minute shifts in the Earth's rotational orbit. So, he says, this so-called telepathy and clairvoyance was, he says, more likely when the global geomagnetic activity was lower than the days before or afterwards. So he's saying it's magnetism, literally, not animal magnetism, but earth magnetism that's causing little shifts in our brain and realigning our brain to the point where we feel like we see and experience these kinds of things. That's what he says. You ready for another one? Yeah, I am. You have Villanor Ramadan. He is born in 1951. He is currently a professor of psychology and the graduate program of neurosciences at the University of California, San Diego. He focused much of his study upon sleep paralysis, and he also talks about the phantom limb experience, whereby the odd phenomena that occurs when a patient insists on feeling the presence of an arm or a leg after it is amputated, which is about 80% of the cases. So there you have it. So he argued that the bedroom intruder, often experienced during sleep paralysis, may be related to the phenomena of phantom limbs, stating that we postulate that a functional disturbance of the right parietal cortex explains the shadowy nocturnal bedroom intruder hallucination during SP. This hallucination may arise due to the disturbance in the multisensory processing of the body and self at the temporal parietal junction. We specifically propose that this perceived intruder is a result of a hallucinated projection of the genetically hardwired body image. So basically involves what's called a mirror neuron. So what are you doing? You're seeing parts of yourself being projected out. So that's another version. You guys ready for another one? We're almost done. Richard Wiseman, 1966, he found that infrasound can trigger odd sensations in the human body and low frequency sounds that normally you wouldn't detect. And that this triggers off in the brain being able to see certain things. So it's disturbances there. Richard Wiseman, C. Watt, and B. Stevens did an investigation of what's called the the Hampton Court Palace, Hampton Court Palace. And what they did is, is there's certain areas or spots in the Hampton Court Palace where people experience things more than others. So what they did is they brought people into this palace who had no idea it was haunted and said, well, if you feel things, just tell us where. And it turned out in so many different times that the same experiences were happening in the same locations, even if they had no idea. So they felt dizziness and headaches and shortness of breath and maybe some kind of force or smelling something or seeing something. And they looked at this and they said that this may connect again to geophysical and or phenomena that's located in these areas. So it's like a natural phenomena as opposed to a supernatural phenomena. Everybody's explaining it away, but you know what? Where do we go from here? Well, we're concluding, but I will say as follows. It looks to me like while it is difficult to prove scientifically, we got testimonials that go all the way back to as early as when we're writing these documents. The Greeks, the Romans, the Chinese, going into Mesoamerica, the Sub-Saharan Africa, the Ancient Middle East. You have the same stories, and if you hadn't noticed, they're similar. They're a lot alike, even in places that are completely disconnected. So maybe it's because we as humans understand sensations to a certain extent in a similar way and then make the same presumptions. But some of these cultures are pretty vastly different. Maybe some of these stories are similar because it's carried through oral tradition. People are telling these stories and it's spreading, and that's why they're so similar. Or maybe the phenomena is real. And the problem is there's too many witnesses. But then again, how do we understand that understanding of perception? Electricity was magic. Now it's science. Maybe it's something that's a natural phenomenon. Maybe it's not. But you know what I can tell you? One thing definitely, it's something, right? So if somebody comes and says, hey, you didn't see anything, I'm going to say, you did see something, but is it in your mind? I don't know. There's something out there, I don't know. But you did see something. You did experience something. And we should never underestimate those who have these experiences. I think that's hubris on the part when somebody says there's no such thing as ghosts. That's a presumption, right? That's a presumption. You don't know, so don't say, just say, I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. But to say that I know, we have empirical belief, proof that there's no such thing, because you know what? It's all how you read or understand the phenomena, how you read the evidence. And we all read evidence in different ways. You got to be very careful about this topic. And I say, err on the side of being humble and just go, oh, I believe that you believe. Maybe I don't believe, but I believe that you believe. And I honor you. I honor your tradition. I honor your legacy. I honor what you are about. And your belief system from your perspective, I do understand that. As long as you don't impose your beliefs upon me, then that's fine. And I think that's good because it looks to me like while evidence may appear to be against it, the testimonials appear to be for it, many of them. There's quite a few. There's a crowd of witnesses. And the question is, can they all be wrong? Maybe they can be all wrong, but maybe it is something. Is this good? You guys understand? You guys are breathing up there? Did we have fun today? Did you guys hear lots of cool stories to tell other people? Because that's why we're here. To tell cool stories. Yeah, sure. Halloween's over. Sure, the Day of the Dead's over. But, maybe now people will listen because there's so much overkill during Halloween. You heard all these stories. Now you can just kind of spook them with a few of these stories that you've learned when they're less in that mindset. Maybe scare them a little bit more. Okay. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this talk and have a great night. If you have any questions, I'm still here. There we go.
Okay. Got some great comments tonight. We got to talking about wind as the soul is wind, and that's why you have to stab, right? Okay, so the Pythagoras one from Kelly. Pythagoras believed that beans contain the souls of the dead and refused to eat them.
Yep. Yeah. Pythagoras, how he was killed was he was being chased at Crotona, being chased from his where he was living by a crowd, and he approached the bean field, and because he did not want to cross that bean field for that reason, he was trapped and died. Yeah. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. Yep. Because it has trapped air. You don't wonder why beans have trapped air. Why would we believe that? Anyway, apparently it does, right? Good. Yeah, I see some other comments here. I think I'll go back. Hey, wow, there's a lot of comments. Wow. Okay.
You were chatting.
Huh? You guys are really, really, really chatty. Okay. So this one says, this lecture was brilliant. I can tell you are very passionate about these subjects, and I think that is a very handsome quality. I love to learn, and like you, I am passionate of these subjects as well. I'm faithful and I'm hungry to learn. I was wondering what other lectures you offer, and do you offer one-on-one lectures and discussions, and are they expensive? And the answer is, I offer these every 2 weeks. So you could be here next week and the week after. I'm here. And am I up for a one-on-one lectures? Sure, I haven't thought about that. Maybe Terry can give you my email on that. But so I'm here. Thank you so much for the kind words. And yes, I offer lectures on everything from archaeology to ancient history to religion, ancient religion, all the way through the Middle Ages. And I do a little bit of modern stuff as well. So thank you. Kelly says, being a Japanese housewife ain't no joke, I guess. No, you guys, because if you don't treat, this is kind of like, if you don't treat your wife well in this life, she may come back in a vengeful sense. So maybe this is a way of society trying to balance itself out a little bit. Kelly says, sounds like similar to the side, excuse me. Yes, it is, to the fairy tradition. Yeah, fairy traditions are very similar, have similar ones also in parts of India too. So it is fascinating. Okay, Thomas says, well, it is more modern. I read about the Filipinos called the Pastasat during World War II and the Japanese occupation. They could not afford to bury the dead soldiers, so they just covered the body up with a reed mat. So it was an unsettled burial. People would further loot the bodies, thus angering the ghosts more. They would be and still are seen wandering around passerbys. Ooh, that's a good story. The way to get rid of them is to stab the corpse, and a horrible stench would come out, and that would free the spirit. Lots of stabbing. Yeah, it's interesting because on the Philippine Islands, that's how they get rid of those vampires and those other creatures. You stab them at the same time. You stab them in the back of the neck. Interesting. So same idea. Laurel says, you think stabbing the corpse would just annoy it further? Well, apparently it releases them like a balloon, right? Kelly says it probably ties into the belief that spirit is made out of wind, so they were releasing their wind. Yes, the idea of that spirit is air, just like you have ruach, right, in Hebrew, which is wind, which is breathed upon to create life within humans. It goes into our nostrils, into our lungs, and vivifies us and gives us life. So breath, wind, and of course, spirit. Is connected to that word. So very good. Margie says, right, it's already dead. I like that, Kelly. That makes sense. Great cat tonight. Thomas, your comment was really interesting. Thomas says, that's what I thought, but the stabbing too. But I agree with Kelly. Maybe it needs a hole in the corpse or the reed mat to release it out of the corpse like the wind. Yes. Kelly says, funny fact. Yep. We were here. Yep. Pythagoras believed that beings contain the souls of the dead. We talked about that, right? Julian says, you do say that the body weighs less at death, and so electrical energy has left it. So it is logical that it could have an effect on the magnetic aspect of places, as electricity and magnetism are related. Great response, Julian. I had somebody tell me, well, the reason why it weighs left is because they're releasing their bodily fluids, and excrement. But the reality is this happens even before that happens. So there is some kind of phenomenon going on there. Margie says, that is an afterlife I truly hope is not the way the universe actually works. I wonder what that refers to. A gastroenterologist or exorcist? Oh my God, good question. Great lectures always, Terry. See y'all. And finally, Jillian says, oh, okay. Thanks. Have 3 questions. I may. It strikes me as odd that some cultures believe burning preserves for spiritual eternity, tonight's burning of the sand of cremation, while other cultures believe burning will completely destroy both the physical and spiritual essence. Stories in popular fiction, such as horror films, burn the remains of the body to get rid of the ghost. and the TV series literally called Supernatural has the very same concept. I would have thought there would be just one belief over time, practicing the different beliefs rather than two contradictory beliefs. Yeah, it's interesting because you have the idea of fire as being destructive, that it ends the essence that is the air. Because, what do you do physics wise, right? People have observed this for a long time, right? Fire does kind of eat up the oxygen, right? It takes it away. So you have that, but you have this other idea that fire represents transformation. It's a transformative concept. And so they're looking at the same similar phenomena in two completely different ways. One is eats it up and turns that flesh, it releases the flesh so the spirit can go free. In other cases, it's believed to destroy completely. And again, it's how that developed is a good question, and I don't know exactly how that happened, but there is a difference there. Number two, is there a link correspondence or a common origin for the idea of multiple souls or multiple levels of the soul in the Egyptian and Kabbalah Jewish traditions? I think there are. Is there a tradition of multiple souls or levels of the soul? Yeah. Of course, the Egyptians have multiple souls, and of course you have that. You have within
The Haitians do too, I think.
Haitians do too.
Sorry to interrupt.
And
I think so, yeah.
And also, many of those of sub-Saharan Africa do as well. They have multiple. There's two different aspects of soul, or more. You also have. I'll go a little bit further. Some places in Southeast Asia, you can have a soul, and you can be sharing another soul inside of yourself. You have multiple souls. Sometimes you can have 7 souls within you. You really have soul then, right? You've got spirit. Yes, you do. You got spirit. How about you? And I got 7. So yeah. So the answer is yes. Yes, absolutely. And finally, okay. Going slightly beyond what we discussed tonight, does anyone believe or claim that aliens have ghosts? The aliens have ghosts? Because if they exist and if they have a physical form, it would be reasonable to assume they have a spiritual aspect too. So the idea, if there is a ghost, of aliens do exist, would they have ghosts? And I don't know, why not? Why would they have a spirit? Maybe not. I mean, would it be something that we can even comprehend when it comes to an alien, right? Is this something that's so far outside of our understanding? Maybe they're all one. I don't know. That's speculation on my part. So I don't actually know. So, but it's
Chewbacca had a ghost. I'm sure of it. Chewbacca had a spirit. I'm sure.
Who had a spirit?
Chewbacca from Star Wars.
Chewbacca. Well, yeah, and of course, obviously, we go Star Trek, Star Wars. I think Spock has a soul. And we're talking. I think, so yeah, alien life is assumed that they're like us enough, near us enough that they all have souls. But when it comes to really thinking about the topic, I don't know. I honestly don't know. So some theorize that the aliens people have encountered are the same as spirits, ghosts, demons, fairies, etc. So who knows? Yeah. So maybe all is one. Different possibilities. Yeah.
I had a question in regards to that basically. The gods seem to be very similar to spirits because they have bodies made of aether and stuff. And I was kind of wondering, is there really much of a differentiation between spirits and gods? What's the real difference? Neoplatonism goes into it a little bit, but.
Well, it's fascinating because, in the Mesopotamian civilization, we'll start there. We talk about the gods. How are the gods different from humans, And usually it's 3 different things. First of all, the gods are immortal. Second of all, they're all powerful. And third of all, they're able to make themselves invisible. So when coordinating with that idea translates over to the Greeks and translates over to the Romans and to the gods in general in ancient times. They're able to do these. But in many cases, they're just like us. Many of them at first, before they become spiritualized, they eat, they drink, they go number 2, they party, they interact with each other, have intercourse, have affairs, so they do what we do, but this is what separates them from us. So the question you're hitting at is, so what about ghosts? Can ghosts do that? Well, what happens, of course, is eventually the gods will be looked at in as spiritual, but at first not. And ghosts are not powerful. They're not all powerful. However, it seems the Japanese ghosts were going there. So
I was about to mention the Japanese housewives. They're gods.
Yeah, just watch out for the Japanese housewives, right? They'll get at you. So, yes, but except for them, usually if you're dead, they're not able to. They're able to bring you bad luck, but they're not able to, cause hurricanes or burn down Tokyo. Right. So they're less powerful.
It's just power level we're looking at then.
Yeah, and then the
spirits are more powerful.
Yes, and then the other thing is immortality. What do you consider immortal? Immortal is, I mean, if you're a ghost, you may be sort of immortal, but you're not. You're living kind of a peripheral existence. Sometimes in the underworld, you're wandering about. But there seems to be an expiration code on your spirit wandering that eventually you're going to fade away. Where a god supposedly is always there. Does that help?
Yeah, it's basically like the gods are more static. They don't really change. They don't reincarnate. They don't recycle. I guess
There's no recycling. Yeah, but at the same time, you have those who are in between. Remember the heroes, the Greco Roman heroes, who are half god and half human. And in many of these cases, they bridge the gap in between. It makes everything kind of fuzzy because when they die, sometimes it's kind of a flip, and sometimes it's like, since they're half and half, sometimes they go through what was called apotheosis, and then they become a god, and they become immortal.
They climb the power ladder.
Huh?
They climb the power ladder.
They call it power level. Yeah, power ladder. So yeah, they move all the way up. And then sometimes they get, a little placement in the stars, you can see them,
Oh, like a sleepyish, you get to become a constellation. It's like,
yeah, well, I consider that a consolation prize.
Yes.
Opposed to the whole, okay, that's a bad joke, sorry. But
thank you for elucidating on that, though, because I've always been kind of confused about that.
Yeah.
It makes it make more sense.
Yeah, and then what happens is that, long and short of it is, people thought everything was physical at first. Even the gods were physical because everything was contained within this. It looks like an egg with a floating disc. That was the Earth. It floated, and then you had the dome of the sky, and of course it kind of circled around like this. And so it was a flat Earth with a dome, and because it was so close, you could see the gods up there, right? So they must be just like us. They must be physical. They sit on a throne. They must eat, they must drink, they must do all physical things. So that was great. Look at the stars, it's kind of consistent, going around. And then all of a sudden, they looked at they see these strange stars called planeos. In Greek, it means planeo, means wanderer. And they're not working well with the others. And so what happens is they do the calculations, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, it blows up. It turns out this dome doesn't exist. It goes on more in a vast way. And this causes a problem because, you see, they believe, they start to believe, like Empedocles, they believe that there's actually just four elements: earth, air, fire, water, right? But now that the gods are out there beyond us, they're supposed to be immortal, they're supposed to be all omnipotent, all powerful, they're beyond us. They can't be made out of water. They can't be made out of earth. They can't be made out of fire. They can't be made out of air because they have to contain all that within them. And they're outside of it too at the same time. And so therefore they determined they're made out of ether, which is spirit, that which is beyond. And they add a fifth element. Does that make sense? And that's how all of a sudden they're going, oh no, a physical God then becomes a spiritual God because otherwise it limits them.
Yeah, I think the color blue got associated with them because of that, because the sky's blue and they assumed aether must be blue. And that's why we have blue Krishna and things like that.
It all makes sense. Yeah. So that's how they entered into that realm. And of course, later on, they calculate the Earth. It turns out, during the 2nd century BC, it turns out to be round. then it goes on from there. But the point of the matter is, yeah, so that's how the gods, and then of course the idea is that the God concept comes about. It's like, well, we have all these gods. Should there be something that coordinates it all? And then they start having more and more idea that there must be some kind of centralizing, some kind of upper rung that decides everything. And so more and more, even pagans were saying, well, there must be some all high power. And of course, that will become Zeus, right? And that becomes, Jupiter. That becomes Brahma, right? Now, with Shiva and Vishnu connected into this threesome. Right. So you have these overarching deities, and then later on, it becomes more exclusivistic. Yeah. So this is a formation, but meanwhile, ghosts and spirits. Then again, here we go. I'm glad you brought this up, Kelly, because also it changes us, because when we're realizing that these are spirit gods, that maybe within in us is something that's spirit. That's not earth, air, fire, water. It must be ether too. It must be something spark, a spark of divinity. Then that, of course, next to the spark of divinity, we got to focus on that. And then Hinduism, they go, all right, how do we focus on this? Well, I mean, in our spark, we have, so therefore, we got the samsara, we got the wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth, right? And how do we go up? What holds us back is negative karma, right? Karma. So, but we need to do good actions, right? And then, therefore, we go through reincarnation, obviously, but we move her up to moksha. Our spirit becomes more purified, that little spark. And then, of course, we're emancipated with liberation. And of course, goes into Buddhism too, but that's a different concept because there's no soul Buddhism. But yeah, so it does connect to other ideas. And it does mess up the ghost story. It messes it up, right? Because then, spirit, if you're good, it's supposed to go to a great place. So that makes all the others, the ones that hang around, you must have done something bad. You're stuck in purgatory, or something bad, you were forgotten. Does that make sense? You become the leftovers if you're a ghost.
Or something bad happened to you to die.
Or or you got forgotten. You got forgotten. Something bad happened. And also the other part is, of course, proper burial rites. You can be totally good, but if you didn't get the proper burial rites, then you're going to make sure that happens. And that is a big theme too. So proper burial rites, that's a big one. But the other one is terrible things may have happened to you. Trauma. So I think what spooks me is your last thought. Be careful of your last thought, because it could manifest amongst the Japanese, manifest into something else, right? Manifest into its own. I would like to play that game though. Wouldn't it be fun? We all have 100 ghost stories to tell, though. I don't know. Or I should say 99 ghost stories. Any other questions? You guys
I
have
had
fun?
a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, so I found interesting the concept of the ghost ship, because in that situation, it's like it's a non-physical entity that becomes the ghost. But on the other hand, it's like the sailors often refer to their ship as a person, almost like they name the ship after a woman. They call her, or she never gives up her souls. But it's a rare instance where like a physical, it's an inanimate object is actually the ghost, which I found interesting.
Yes, and so thank you, Kelly, for coming. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, it was great. I hope to see you again, Kelly. Thomas, is interesting because how do we justify this idea of inanimate objects coming back if we are associated with ghosts with the soul or with the spirit, of somebody? It's animistic, right? There's spirit in all things. And the spirit within the ship, does that make sense? And it kind of seems animistic, the spirit of the ship that has some kind of sympathy, some kind of, not sympathies and sympathy, but universal sympathy, has some kind of connection with the person. right? There's a
It's
bond.
tragic because a lot of souls die in the ship at once when it sinks,
Right.
and they don't
And their
get proper burials and all that.
But also maybe their energies connect to the inanimate object.
Yeah, so they attach to the object.
And so that's also, Abraham Lincoln died. Supposedly there's these ghost trains, the morning train of Abraham Lincoln, supposedly going across the tracks, and people would see this. It's like, what is this about,
Wow.
But yeah. So maybe the ghost ships are, and how do you explain, ghosts wearing clothes, or should they just be naked? Right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So
You don't want to get any tickets for being, indecent exposure or anything, though.
Yeah, but you'd see a Victorian ghost. They're all proper. They're wearing the top hat and the nice suit and the cane. And, I mean, they're all fancy, or the dress. Ladies wearing the beautiful dress. I mean, or they're wearing whatever they're supposedly dyed in, right?
Yeah. There's a funny TV show called Ghosts. If anybody's watched it, it cracks me up. Yeah, isn't it great?
I watch it. Yep, I'm addicted to it. Yep, I watched every episode except for the one tonight because I've been talking.
It's good.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So maybe it's a spiritual attachment. If you believe in ghosts, right? Maybe it's a real spiritual connection energetically to these objects. The ship goes down. These people are dying. Their energy is connected to the ship, or it could be just something else. It could be the idea that and things to be. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of possibilities. But
did the ship take the Egyptians to heaven, like the pharaohs?
Yeah, you had the ghost ship. Yeah,
they would have to go in the boat to get to wherever they needed to go.
Yeah, you had the barge, the ghost barge.
Mm.
Yeah, the ghost barge. Yep, you go down. And so you could take the boat. Maybe it's like an echo of that. It's interesting because when it comes to the ghost ship, this is kind of fun. So many people who are supposedly credible saw these ghost ships, and they're so serious about it. And I read a few articles. It doesn't mean that they really saw it, or maybe they did see it. But this has made more modern studies think that, well, these people are really, they are people of great sobriety. How in the world could they see a ghost? I'll give an example. Okay, so Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. She is a Calvinistic, very strict Christian woman, and she's staying in the White House and she's reading her Bible, and this person comes to the door and wearing a hat with a beard and wearing an outfit looking exactly like Abraham Lincoln. And she's irritated. She doesn't know she knows who Lincoln is, but she doesn't know who this is. So she complains because she's trying to read her Bible. And they're like, we don't have a servant that looks like that. Your description, face, everything else is what Churchill saw and what, we stayed here and everything. Is like, oh, okay. So what do we do with the witness who is a protesting witness, a witness who doesn't believe in that, and they see it? What do we do with that? So, maybe she's had like a moment of this open moment of disconnection, maybe in an energetic way, or magnetic something happened, or maybe she reflected on Abraham Lincoln for a second and saw that reflection there. Does that make sense? But still, she thought she saw it. And so we're back to scientists are going, well, all these people are not gullible. There's got to be some kind of explanation. Does that make sense?
I think it's funny that she was like, well, why is Lincoln visiting me?
Yeah.
It'd be like if I saw an apparition of Margaret Thatcher, I'd be like, okay, well, what's up with that? Why is she visiting me?
She's staying in the White House, but you're right. Why is it? She doesn't know it's Lincoln. She thinks it's somebody else. So
she was in the White House?
Yeah, she stayed at the White House.
Oh, my bad. I thought,
Yeah,
okay, I didn't
yeah,
hear that
yeah,
part.
she stayed at the White House. The funny part is she thought it was somebody else, and she described it like, well, that's Lincoln. Oh, so it's like, oh, well, I don't believe in things like that. You're kind of like, oh, what did I just do? I just proved the belief system. I don't. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
what do we do with people who don't believe at all? They're not looking for it, and then they experience it. What do we do with those testimonials?
Well, maybe the ghost knows that the person needs to try to believe it. So
Yeah.
it goes to them, kind of like a dog that or an animal, and they can sense a person is down or sick, they attach themselves to that person.
Yes, absolutely. And it brings up Charles Dickens again. It brings up where you're not sure he's part of the ghost club. At one point, he seems to be skeptical. The other times, he seems to be playing with it. And when you take a look at the Christmas Carol, right? If you take a look at um, what Ebenezer Scrooge, right? You take a look there. He doesn't. He is. He is Scrooge playing the part of the skeptic, right?
Yes.
But what's the story? He becomes a believer, doesn't he? It's like,
yeah.
it's a
And it turns his
conversion
life
story. It's a
Yeah.
conversion.
Yep.
He's not going to believe that kind of thing, and then he converts, or does he convert? He thinks it's an illusion or or disillusion, and and so the reader is following him. Dickens' narrative, going, wait, is it an unprepared bit of potato, or are you really seeing these three ghosts? It just makes you think. So,
but it took 3 times for them to get him to convert. It took 3 different ghosts. It wasn't until he saw the future one that really scared the crap out of him. He's like, I better convert.
I better convert. And so maybe we are seeing revealed in here. I don't know if there's a Charles Dickens excerpt here. I may be completely wrong, so I'm just guessing here. Don't worry. Although I have read all his works, well, almost all his works. I have the complete works. I read most of them. The point is that maybe we're reading his own personal struggle with this issue that's coming out in narrative form. Maybe I'm wrong, but when I'm reading it, that's what I feel. My dad has a tradition. Every Christmas, he reads to himself the entire Christmas Carol. That's his tradition. That's a lovely tradition. But,
wow.
Yeah. Well, it's a commitment. I'm going to read it every. It's kind of like what's his name of Lord of the Rings? The guy that plays Saruman. The big name. What's his name? The vampire. Oh, it's his name. Come on. Saruman. You guys help me out here. Big Christopher Lee. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Christopher Lee would read the entire Tolkien trilogy every year, right? So he deserved that part. But yeah, so yeah, we don't, so we don't have all the answers, and I think that's good. I think it's a kick in our complacency. I think that we need to be less hubristic, and I think as a society we should just learn to say, "I don't know," a little bit more often. I do. I honestly do. I'm a scholar. I spent my whole life in archives and study, going through research. I've been everywhere, and I teach critical thinking courses for a living at the 2 universities. That's all we do is critical thinking, and yet I'm sitting here, and I'm going to be humble enough to say, when it comes to the evidence, I don't know. My own personal beliefs, I put them aside because this is an academic talk. When it comes to the academic aspects, I don't know, and I think we should be more open to saying that.
I agree.
Yeah. Are we okay? Any other thoughts? All right, I will release you into the ether. Thank you. Sorry, you didn't see my end bits of question 2. Sounds like the concept of the Rings film. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. I'm sorry. I apologize here. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. I think there are 5 in each. Yes, that's right. But I'm not too sure. No, that's 5. In the Kabbalists, there are 3 main souls or levels of the soul, which connect to at least touch parts of the body, plus 2 higher souls or levels of the soul, completely transcending the body, separate from it at least the time of exile from Eden onwards. Yeah. So you're asking the idea, are there multiple souls? You know, are you familiar with Zoroastrianism? In Zoroastrianism, you have two souls that are distinct from one another. What happens is you're born and your soul splits into two, and one's the oversoul. That oversoul watches you like a guardian angel, but still part of yourself, but still not, and see if you've been naughty or nice. And then when you die, the two aspects of the soul are united for the first time, in a sense. And then you cross over the Chinvat Bridge, and if your oversoul said you've been naughty, that Chinvat Bridge twists and turns, and you fall into the house of pain. But if you've been nice, then you cross over to the house of song. So you do have the idea of the two soul concept. Another group that has two separate souls happens to be many groups within East African traditions. They have the two souls that operate, by the way, in exactly the same way as Zoroastrianism. They operate as a guardian oversoul. And a lot of people are going, but Afghanistan, Persia is a little far away from, East Africa. It's like, yeah, well, but there you have it. So I hope that helps, Jillian. Is that interesting? So you have a two soul concept. When you talk about metaphysics in Platonism, you have the triple soul concept. That informs aspects of the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah has a lot of Neoplatonic conceptions there. So you got that which is the monad, which is the one. You got, of course, obviously, that which is the aspect of the pronouns. And then, of course, beyond that, you have that soul, or sometimes known as Hecate, sometimes known as, this makes sense. But they say that above also reflects the below. And what I'm trying to say is the macrocosm of the universe, of this tripart division of the universe, is the microcosm of yourself within you. That helps. I don't know. Anyway, any other questions at all? No? All right. Yeah, thanks for covering the rest of it. As above, so below, very common. Yes, it is, indeed. Thank you, Julian, for being here. And I hope to see you next time. I'll be back in 2 weeks, I believe.